although the bus is late, there's a second arrow that I bring to it, which is the suffering, the secondary suffering of starting to escalate the story that I've got. Perfect effort. I was just kind of thinking about what perfect effort is to me, or just effort generally. In the spiritual life, I think of virya, which is energy in pursuit of the good. I think of that as a type of effort. Also think about balanced effort. We've just been meditating, and in your meditation practice, you might make too much effort, and maybe you'll notice that by a headache or feeling quite stiff in the body. Or you can make too little effort and you could be a bit more in your body, probably a bit slouchy, a bit sleepy, a bit slothy, sloth and torpor, which you could, is part of it. So you can talk about balanced effort. You're going between being receptive and active. And as I said, you can go with virya, which is energy in pursuit of the good. But what we're exploring today is also the dynamic part of the spiritual life, the dynamic part of the spiritual life. The spiritual life as dynamic. And it's not really about rushing around and doing things, but sort of being mentally and spiritually and aesthetically active. This is what Sangharakshita says in his book. And it's now concerned, this level of right effort is around looking at, once your basic needs are met, your need for shelter, your need for food, your need for love and affection comes up quite high. So looking at the, Maslow's hierarchy of needs, it's kind of the top end, the self-actualization, the self-transcendence, that end where you're exploring your potential and also looking beyond yourself, transcending self. So it's at that end of that we're exploring. And in the book, Sangharakshita talks about this as the higher evolution. He talks about that. So we're not so communal based at this point. We're going into the individual making an effort to awake in the Buddhist context. So there's two types of perfect effort. There is general perfect effort, and there's specific perfect effort. And general perfect effort is that we have to have some activity. We have to strive a little. Yeah, not a little, maybe maybe a bit more, depending on who you are and what your particular characteristics are in the spiritual life. So it involves making some effort. It involves striving. And then there's another area that's called the specific perfect effort, and that consists of the 4 exertions. So we're going into another list for you guys. So, and it's also, this is really around working with our mental states. So there's four exertions as part of specific perfect effort. So the mental states that we'll explore is preventing unskillful mental states from arising. Then there's eradicating unskillful mental states. So they've already come, so we need to look at eradicating them. And then there is the cultivating or the developing of skillful mental states, yeah? And then lastly, how do we keep going towards maintaining and deepening skillful mental states, yeah? So those are the 4 exertions, yeah? Yes. So what mental states are we trying to prevent? Yeah, what we're trying to prevent. They're the mental states that look at greed, hatred, and delusion. So we've always, at the root, until we're enlightened, we're always going to have, possibly at the bottom of, if you look at your actions, look at your efforts, part of them will come from this root cause of greed, hatred, and delusion. Yeah. So this is what we want to prevent arising. Yeah. Why do we need that to? Why should we? Do we love our greed? Do we love our hatred? Do we love our delusion? I don't know. You test it out for yourself. Do those actually cause you to have unskillful mental states? Do they lead you into more difficult experiences of yourself and relationship to other people? So you test it out for yourself whether that's true. Okay, and then we look at. So we talked about the preventing unskillful mental states, and then we, in order to look at that, we must be aware. We must be aware. So, how do we become aware? We can use the meditation practices to become fully aware of what is going on for ourselves. Yeah, we won't know ourselves until we start to look at ourselves in a kind and clear manner. Yeah, clarity, which is partly what meditation does. So, eradicating unskillful mental states. These are the states that are known as the hindrances. The other word for them is nirvana, the nirvanas. Yeah, which means uncoverings. I really like the word uncoverings rather than hindrances, just because hindrances implies like you have to battle with it, and whereas uncoverings feels like there's more mystery to it. Yeah. So hindrances or uncoverings are around things like sloth and torpor, doubt and indecision. This is what we're looking at eradicating: doubt and indecision, sloth and torpor, hatred, which is aversion, sense desire that's related to craving. Yeah. So grabbing. Nothing wrong with pleasure, but if you grab at it, then it causes you suffering. So all of this is around looking at suffering. Yeah. So yes, so we look at those. So as I said, there's sloth and torpor, there's doubt and indecision, there's hatred, and there's restlessness and anxiety. These are the hindrances that we're trying to eradicate, so that we develop, so that we can have a clearer capacity to see what's going on and see into our potential. So we're going to, how do we cultivate skillful mental states? Yeah, how do we cultivate skillful mental states? So we can do that by looking at things like awareness. Awareness is part of the positive mental states, yeah? So we're cultivating awareness through meditation. Loving kindness helps us to accept and to respond to ourselves with friendliness, yeah? We can be, it includes things like generosity, kindness, yeah? Absorption, yeah? Those types of the qualities. There's other things about positive, encouraging positive mental states. And then the last area of the 4 exertions is maintaining those mental states, yeah? Maintaining those positive, these skillful mental states. And you do that by practicing, yeah? Keep coming back. Every time you feel like it's not working, keep coming back. Turning up on the mat, turning up to your meditation, turning up to your ethical life, turning up to being in the Sangha. All these things will help you maintain spiritual friendship. All of these things can help you to maintain positive mental states, skillful mental states, yeah? So, well, today, I had an experience of the bus not coming on time, yeah? So the bus didn't come on time. And that's a regular thing that it's part of life. But also, I have a tendency towards cutting it fine with time. And today was no exception to that, yeah. So not giving myself enough time. So I know that leads to me getting all anxious and tight, which and also there's a expectation that buses will come on time because I'm getting the bus, and it's natural that will come. So there's a kind of expectation of control and knowing that that the bus will come on time, and that feeds into a bit of delusion, a delusion about the world revolves around me. And then the bus broke down, and so then I get into the oh, you should have left earlier, you should have done this, you should have done that. And that feels like that comes under aversion. And then there's, well, yeah, it feeds into that sense of judgment and being critical about the experience. So it feeds into, although the bus is late, there's a second arrow that I bring to it, which is the suffering, the secondary suffering of starting to escalate the story that I've got, yeah? So, papancha. And then if I don't stop there, that just breeds on, and I get more and more anxious and more upset, and I think about, well, who I'm letting down. I might even go into, it can take me all the way to starting to think in terms of stereotypes about, black people are always late. They're always late. It goes, and so there's lots of pain that gets associated with that. And then, but then if I can just stop and just see what I'm doing, then I start to take in who's around me, like the bus driver. And the bus driver, he has targets too, and he, all through the day he's got to get to this place and that place in time. And there's always the traffic, and there's always something an obstacle. So I start to think about what's, this bus driver's experience. The frustration maybe that he gets into when he doesn't get to complete what he feels like, or she completes that. And I also start to notice every day I go on the bus, maybe I don't even look at this person. I just go on, put my Oyster card on, and then they take me to wherever I want to go. And yet they hold my life in their hands, yeah? Because I don't know that I'm going to get there, but there's a big assumption. So again, I start to really appreciate what they, appreciation comes in.
Do you think that appreciation might have come from practicing the metta-bhavana?
Yeah.
You were excited laying the groundwork.
Yeah. Very much so. I wouldn't, I would hardly have looked at the, like in the third stage of the metta-bhavana, I would have not thought about bus drivers or anybody in particular at that stage, yeah. And then at the last stage, it was just a sense that, well, we all have targets and we all have, and then we all get frustrated. And can I bring some kindness to that and that connection? Yeah. And there are other people on the bus being frustrated too.
So that's a really live example you just gave. I know we were waiting for poor you texting us that you were stuck on a bus, and I've been thinking as you were talking that preventing in a way is more subtle than eradicating. So you really have to know your own psychology and tune in to, maybe you're aware that you can be, cut it fine, but maybe if you were focusing more on preventing, that maybe you would think maybe to really make a practice of leaving, area. Yeah. Not that it's any. I do that myself, but I was just trying to think, how it's quite a difficult thing to think ahead enough to prevent when we're in the midst of life and there's just so many things coming our way, and it's just so easy to fall into all those habits. But I love that whole idea of preventing. But the good news is that, like your example showed, well, you didn't prevent a certain, unhelpful way your mind went that was causing you suffering. But then because you were maintaining through practice of the metta-bhavana or whatever, you were able to eradicate that mental state. So even though you didn't prevent it, you were able to eradicate it because of the momentum of your practice. Yeah. So that's the good news.
Yeah. I feel, like preventing is like you're really looking at your conditions, aren't you?
Yes.
And this is what we are in an exploration of conditionality, or what is impacting. So I feel like if I could, like we said, if I left earlier, the conditions, I start to maybe feel a bit more expansive.
Yes.
And even if it did come late, I'd still feel that there was possible choice. And there is choice all the time, but there'd be a bit more freedom in it. Yeah.
But it's hard when we're in what's been called the oppression of life. All the things life throws. I was just trying to think one way I get myself into a bad mental state in the past was not saying no to things that I knew I really didn't want to do.
Yeah.
And I wouldn't say no, and then I'd really get very angry with myself. I'd get resentful towards the other person. And when I started noticing that when I was meditating, I think that really helped, alongside of other things, like talking to friends about it. It became more important to me to say no, even at the risk of displeasing someone, because I knew that staying in more positive mental states is more precious to me, and that ultimately I'd be of, better use to other people, So it's a very helpful area. I really love the 4 exertions. I just love this: preventing, eradicating, cultivating, maintaining.
It sounds really active as well, doesn't it?
Yeah, it does.
It is an
It
active
does.
thing.
Yeah, and what Sangha says too, it's the word for exertion in Sanskrit is, I forget the exact word, but it's more to do with gymnasium and exercise, and that's what it's kind of like, exercising muscles.
Yes.
And that if we're not making an exertion, we just tend to be inert. We just tend to get carried away with our habits. Thank you for tuning into our Dharma Night this week. If you feel you've benefited from this, or know anyone else who might benefit, we'd ask you if you consider making a donation so we can continue to offer these classes to as many people as possible, and also develop what we have to offer to the community, and to help us to grow our community, which we feel really is of benefit to many people. And so we need money to hire space, media, all sorts of things to keep things running. So, and with COVID, we're not able to run regular classes as usual, and I'm sure everyone's feeling a pinch from these extraordinary conditions. But if you can, and if you're waged, we ask you to consider to make a £10 donation, or unwaged £5, or whatever you can afford. There's a link on this page. Thanks very much.